and welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about all the crazy stupid stuff that people do in marketing and how to not do crazy stupid stuff. But what is crazy stupid stuff, you might be wondering? Let's quickly frame that for everybody because it is going to be very relevant as part of our conversation today, which is about marketing yourself. So first of all, crazy. Crazy is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, but not getting a different result. Definition of insanity. And stupid. You know what's so funny is now I feel like really weird saying that because my 7-year-old gives me the hardest time. He's like, Mom, that's a swear word. And so I'm like, it is when we talk about people, but not when we talk about marketing. So the things that are stupid in marketing are the things that you're doing because someone told you that you should, but you don't really understand why you're doing it. You don't see the benefit, you don't feel good about it, doesn't feel authentic, and those types of things. So as part of our conversation today, actually this is part 3 in a 3-part series on marketing yourself. So we've talked about how to market yourself for people who are in more academic backgrounds. We used a use case of anthropologists for that one. So if you find yourself in that category, you can go back and take a look at that episode. We also did an episode for IO psychology practitioners, which I said IO psychologist, but there's a whole thing in that episode that came out about that phrasing, which is more about like the people type of business things where maybe you have more intangible value than you might be able to show on like a resume with tangible value. I used air quotes there if you're just listening. And today we're talking about marketing yourself for tech leaders. So some people who might actually have the background that falls more into those tangible things that people might want to see on a resume as specific coding language or specific experience that people are looking for, and how those people whom a lot of whom I met are like marketing. And how we can market ourselves as tech leaders. So to join me in the conversation, I have the lovely Priya, who herself is a tech leader, but also has some specific experience in this arena that she's going to be able to share with you, but also to help us ask good questions to help all you other tech leaders who are joining us today. And mentioning that, if you happen to be a tech leader joining us today, or you happen to be anybody who's joining us today, really, and you have questions or perspectives or experiences that you would like to share, this is what this nifty comment section is for. So regardless of where you're watching, whether it's YouTube or LinkedIn or Facebook, there is a little chat comments place. If you have questions, comments, perspectives, insights, all those things, if you're a tech leader and you have your own journey you'd like to share, please put it in the comments. We would love to include it as part of the conversation. It makes the full conversation more robust for everybody. All right, with that, shall we learn a little bit about Priya? Probably, before we get into the conversation. So Priya, first of all, thank you for joining me today. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the journey that you've been on so far?
Hey, Tracy, thank you for inviting me to this awesome, crazy, and inspiring show. I love that I'm able to participate and share some of my experiences as a technology leader here because technologists do not market themselves very well. And I think I have somewhat formulated the code of how to market yourself as a tech leader because growing in tech is, as all the tech leaders know, is the hardest out of all the growth careers that is there. So we'll talk a little bit more about it today. And about me, I've been a technology leader for more than 10 years in the telecommunication industry. And I'm very, very passionate about human-centered innovation in the world of digital and AI. I go to the core of why we do certain things and what is the human factor that is associated with it. And I would say that is something that you can use to market yourself. And I have always been told that I translate complex solutions into impactful outcomes, and I try to do that leading with empathy, integrity, and most importantly, authenticity. And all these values are something that as a tech leader, I use. So not just me, but the people in the room are also going and talking about me. So I market myself inadvertently in those places. And today I'm here to talk about the topic that is really, really close to my heart about, like I said, how I can, as tech leaders, sometimes also in a friendly name called as geeks, how do we market ourselves and how do we make sure that the awesome, cool technology that we are building, just because it is software, it is not touchable, it is not feelable, it doesn't mean it's not of value, right? You build something in cloud and that is doing amazing things today, like even hosting this live for us. So that is a software product that is doing that. So we build cool things. Why not go talk about those cool things and market ourselves?
Yeah. Okay. So let's start the conversation because, again, and maybe this is also partially an external opinion. I have worked in tech companies, but I myself am a marketer, so I have my perspective. Um, there's a lot of very tangible tech things, right? You even talked about we create a platform does a thing, it has features and benefits and things of that nature. And then in your intro, you also mentioned a lot of the more people skills, the empathy, the connection that allows you to be effective as a leader. And so, because I have not had a career in tech, I would love for you, Priya, to just kind of share where does that become an issue for people, like kind of translating from being maybe a software developer into a leader?
Yeah, absolutely, Tracy. So here's what happens when you join fresh out of your school into a tech industry. The first job that you most probably get is coding, where you are given a set of requirements for a product or a feature and you start working on those requirements. Over the course of time, your code becomes your only friend. And making sure that your code is working properly becomes your only job. You sometimes there are developers who don't even look up and look at the people sitting next to them in their own office space. And that's the kind of tech world that we live in today. Unfortunately, what that leads into is just a cocoon of things where you live in your own space, you get comfortable there, and you're not looking up and asking questions on, hey, why am I building this product? What am I writing in my code? Does it even make sense to my customer that I'm doing this? Those are the kind of questions that a leader has to ask. And being in technology field, sometimes you're working too much with the code and you forget about asking these questions and you just value, hey, is my code working? Are the tests complete? And am I able to deploy the code so that my customer can see a flashy new button on the screen? So it's more than that when you grow as a leader. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, it becomes very tough for people.
So, do you have any like successful things in your journey or things you've seen work for other people to kind of nurture that curiosity, knowing that we're probably going to come into the industry in this role and we have to prove ourselves at that level before we can move up into a leadership capacity, but how we can nurture that creativity and curiosity as we go?
Absolutely. Look, I started as a developer, just like the one who was geeky and just working on my code, looking down on my code. The moment I started looking up, started looking around, and started asking questions is when the turning point happened. And I could see that, hey, I'm not building something without knowing why am I building this. And and those questions that I asked sometimes led to different perspectives because people never thought about it. There are different kind of roles, like you're a developer, you're developing code. There is a product person who comes and tells you, hey, this is what I want. This is what I want my customer to use. Can you develop this code for this product? So the product person often does not think about certain things that you as a developer know. So the first thing that I did, which worked very well for me to grow from the basic level to a leader level, in terms of marketing as well as asking questions. So I raised up my hand in a meeting when the requirements were given to me, and I asked, why are we doing this? So first of all, asking the why question is important. And secondly, what is the impact that it is going to make? Because you're going to be writing 10,000 lines of code, and if you don't know one feature over the other, what is making impact, then you're blindly writing code. So knowing the impact of what you're doing is very important as well. Once you know the why and the impact of what it's going to make, then it starts you to think about, hey, am I doing the right thing, or is it something that we can do differently so we don't have to really write 10,000 lines of code? Maybe we can tweak a little bit here and a little bit there, and I'll be able to give an amazing feature to my customer rather than writing everything from scratch. So that sparks curiosity. And when you go and talk about this, you will naturally see a bunch of people who look up at you and say, oh, why I did not think about this? And they will rally behind you to support you. That's what happened in my case. When I was working as a developer, one day I was writing code and I found that the code was giving me some errors. So I looked back at what was written historically. And when I saw that, I realized that, hey, whatever I'm writing now doesn't make sense on what is already written. They are completely different things. So why am I doing this? When I went back and asked the question, why, that's when people realized, oh my God, stop this. We should not do this right now at this point. We should probably think about this design better, come back, and then rewrite the code in a different way. And it started people realizing that, okay, now developers are asking why questions. We need to be more careful about designing things. And people came to me every time there would be somebody coming to me from the product side and ask me opinions on, hey, I'm building this. Would this make sense when you're writing a code? That specific point, they started seeing me as a person who gives input, as a leader. So I've inadvertently marketed myself by just asking that why question.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you kind of summarized that exactly where I was hoping we would go with that, is that we, when we show up with our curiosity, we ask our questions that our brain is thinking. Like, we're not really thinking about what questions to ask, but it's the like questions that naturally come up for us. This is a really, I don't think a lot of people think that's marketing yourself. But when you actually have the courage, and it depends on your working environment. I appreciate that there are working environments that make that safe to do, and there's working environments that maybe make it not quite so safe, and for different groups of people. But even if we go back a layer and say, like, we haven't said our question yet, but we start to own, like, this is what I'm wondering. I always think it's really interesting because from when we are thinking thoughts in our head, we think everyone else is thinking those thoughts as well. And they're like very basic thoughts because they come so easily to us. But that's not true. There are probably, I've experienced this lots of times where I will say what I think is like the most basic question, and people are like, oh, you're right.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that. And like, oh, good thing I mentioned it, because like we were going to go in a crazy direction if nobody actually stood up and said something. And all of us have those unique perspectives. And even if you're looking at it from a like, oh, we all have the same degree, or we all know the same code base, or we all have, I mean, I say this all the time about people who have like a BCom in marketing, right? Like, I have a BCom in marketing. There are lots of other people who have a BCom in marketing, but like, we are not all created equal. And when we have that, maybe it's even just like turning that curiosity in on ourselves and being like, oh, like that's Yeah, I wonder if anybody else thought about that. Maybe I should say it. Maybe I say it publicly, or maybe I share it in an email with a colleague, or maybe I share it in a one-on-one with my manager, or whatever, again, feels kind of safe to start practicing that marketing of yourself. But that really is, marketing yourself is really just showing people you, right? And when we can actually cut down as many barriers as possible between us like thinking our thoughts and sharing them with other people, that's the most effective path to marketing. So it's interesting. Like, I love that this is where we're starting this conversation, because I think a lot of people often think marketing is just about a resume, a cover letter, social media profiles, right? And these types of things. But really, I would say the more effective marketing is showing up and being you and doing what you would do, and being able to break down those barriers against you doing what you would do.
Absolutely, 100%. Um, so you were talking about, hey, how do you show up authentically to a role?
Mhm.
I'm currently a manager for product and engineering at T-Mobile, and I own a group of very highly talented individuals, and we work on something called a site reliability engineering, or SRE. That is, if 100,000 people or even 1 million people, because T-Mobile has 130 million customers and counting now, if millions or 30 million or 130 million people log into the T-Mobile website at the same time, how do you make sure the website does not crash? How do you make sure everything is alive? That is what my team takes care of. And honestly, that's a very big job to do, because you cannot anticipate when so much of traffic would be there, so many people will log in. Of course, you have patterns and algorithms that you look at, but still you have to prepare your application or your platform to support those many number of customers that are coming. And when I started in this field, I was the only woman, and I was looking around, and there were a bunch of people who were just making sure everything is working properly, and waiting or anticipating that moment and preparing for that moment, so that when millions of customers log in at the same time, we don't break. Maybe like buying an Apple iPhone when it's launched, right?
Right.
And one thing that I did when I started in this team was I started as an individual contributor in the team, and I started asking my why question. I asked, hey, why are we doing something called as a blue-green deployment, where you deploy into one specific instance and you keep the other instance safe, so that if millions of customers come and something goes wrong here, you can jump back into the other system, so the customer can continue using your website without a blank page showing, oops, come back later. And when I started asking those questions, why are we doing it? Why can't we do this in a better way? Then people started, oh, yeah. I mean, we need to start thinking about innovative ideas on how to do this. And that gave way to a patent that my team currently has, where we build environments. So think about a local environment. We build that in the software industry one time for every 2 weeks, and we take that across multiple cycles of testing, coding, everything that we do, and we put that safely into production so the customer can see it. And that is a patented technology that has never been done. And everything that started that specific innovation was just asking a why question. And what it did to me in terms of marketing myself is, people started looking at me like, hey, I need a wondering person. I need a person who asks why in this team meeting. So I'm going to pull in Priya to this meeting.
Mhm.
When that happened, other leaders across the company started seeing me as she is a person who asks that uncomfortable question, which others might not want to ask. Like you asked earlier, Tracy, when you mentioned earlier that, hey, that was a very basic question, but I asked it and people were like, wow, you're a genius. Similarly, I asked those sort of questions. So they wanted somebody to ask that questions. And the leaders around saw me as a thought leader who would come in and ask those questions. And eventually that led to me becoming the manager of the team. And currently I'm managing the entire team. So that is a path that you open up for unknowingly, marketing yourself by saying that, asking just the questions of why nobody's asking this? Even that is a question, right? And I'm going to ask this question, just developing that courage to ask the question.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is an interesting point too, because a lot of times when we think about a personal brand, or maybe again, what a lot of people assume a personal brand is from outside the marketing industry, is that a job title, right? Again, like a specific code base that we're very familiar with or something like that. And we forget to think about things like, oh, the person who asks why. Like, where's the person who asks why? We want that person in the room. And again, it's not everyone can be the person who asks why. That's also not the point. When we can tap into like what we would do, what would I ask? What would I do? Would I be like, I've worked with QA engineers that are just like genius as far as I'm concerned, because they think about things differently than I do. And you're like, whoa, I want the QA engineer that came up with the way to break the code. Right? Like, where's the QA engineer that breaks the code? I want them to try and come and break my code. Right?
Yeah.
Like, these are the types of things that again, like, we're not out in the world to break code, but if you're a QA engineer and you're like, I'm the one who makes sure that code doesn't get broken, that's a different thing than saying QA engineer. Because you can go, I love to do this exercise. I mostly do it with marketers, but like, if you go to LinkedIn and you look up marketing specialist, last time I checked, there was 1.7 million of them. This does not differentiate you in any way possible, right? And I would guess similarly, if you put QA engineer, you're going to come up with a whole bunch of people who also have their title QA engineer. And now I, as somebody who might be hiring for a QA engineer who may or may not know anything about QA, right? It's like, well, how do I choose, right? Like, I'll just randomly choose somebody. Well, I think there's also a networking component, but we'll talk about that in a little later. But like, you don't want to be randomly chosen. You don't want to be, those claw machines that come down and you're just trying to like grab whatever animal you can, because nobody ever wins a stupid animal out of those machines. You don't want to be that. You don't want to be one of the stuffies in the claw machine. You want to be the Buzz Lightyear sticking out. Now I'm referencing Toy Story. Sorry if you don't get that. Everyone wants the Buzz Lightyear. But like, when we say things like the QA engineer that makes sure that the broken stuff gets found before clients do, right? Or something like that. And it doesn't have to be like super creative language or anything like that either, right? Just like, this is who I am. I'm the person who asks why when no one else will ask. Oh, I really want someone in my room who will ask why when no one else will ask. And it does two things for you. One, it gives you that more personalized sense of identity that's like, this is mine. It's not like anyone else's. Not every QA engineer has this. I have this. This is useful for me. But also it allows people to choose you based on what you're actually really good at. If you're the person who asks why questions, you do not, I can say this from my own perspective, because I have been in the room, I'm the why person too. And the number of times I've been told, you don't need to know that. I'm just like, well, there might be other people who don't need to know that, except I'm a why person and I'm not good at doing things unless I know that. So if you're not willing to share that information, then you should not have why people in this room. So it also helps you to get into the right rooms and to get into the right interview, to get onto the right career path that can move you through a specific organization, because you're showing up and doing what you would do instead of just doing what everyone would do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke about two things there that piqued my interest, Tracy. The first one is on LinkedIn and how you market yourself outside of what you do, because if I go to someone and I explain as, hey, I'm the manager for site reliability engineering, and we make sure the pipelines are running and the infrastructure is proper. I take care of security, reliability. People are going to be like, huh? And only a handful of people, like you called out, maybe 1 million people who are there in the industry will know what I mean, while a recruiter who's looking for, hey, I want an SRE person would never know what I'm doing unless they search with the keyword site reliability engineering. Instead, what I tell my team and how I have written my bio in LinkedIn is talking really about what are the key qualities that I have, just like you mentioned, for being a site reliability engineer or even a site reliability engineering manager. I talk about being authentic, showing up with your true self, and making sure centered innovation is part of every digital thing that I do in my team. That differentiates me. And then I talk about the qualities that are actually required as a site reliability engineer, wherein you need to know how security systems work. You need to know how to make your platform reliable. So when millions of customers come in at the same time, the platform is not breaking. And you need to make sure you need to have some sort of alerting system, so feedback system that tells you, hey, something is going wrong, go work on it, even before you go find it. So how to proactively set up those things. And the third thing I highlighted on my LinkedIn bio is, of course, the patent that I talked about. What is one thing that is really, really cool about the work that you did for the past 5 years, 10 years? There are people who do cool things every day, but unfortunately, they don't document it. So at the end of the year, we're like, wait a minute, what was the cool thing that I worked on? Probably every day you worked on a cool thing. So my point is keep documenting the cool things that you're working on. And then I took one of those cool things and I highlighted it. So when a recruiter looks at my LinkedIn profile, they're like, oh, wow, this is interesting. That's a patent. This is a person that I definitely want to talk to. Not just a patent, but any cool thing that you did in your work, if you put it there, that would differentiate you across those multiple. You're the toy in the claw machine, so you become the toy that is easily accessible, and you become the better pick. Even there are some algorithms that run behind the scenes to pick people based on the inputs that recruiters give, and even those algorithms nowadays, with the help of AI, has been enhanced to look for these specific types of differentiator that is there on your profile. So I would highly encourage all the tech leaders and all the tech enthusiasts, when you're writing something on your LinkedIn, just don't say, hey, I'm a manager at this company. Just talk a little bit more about what you really do and how you show up for work day to day. There is another thing that you mentioned when you were talking about earlier, mentioning about these, is how technology leaders also come into a room and they're talking about these things, because nothing here is a live product. There is nothing to demo. There is nothing that you can even touch and feel. Everything is software, and you're pulling things out of thin air and drawing it on a invisible whiteboard. So now there are a bunch of people who are talking, and then you ask this question and they say, I don't think you need to know about this. What I have Definitely, I've been in rooms like that. But what I have done to make people answer my question is go back to the point that they were talking about and ask curious questions about it, rather than asking, hey, what is this? I'll start asking some curious questions based on the statements that they are making. And then in unknowingly, they give answer to my question on what is being built. That is one way to get answers out of people. And if you're a technology leader, this is a small trick that I did. Yes, there is a bunch of things that are changing, bunch of things that are happening at the same time, and you as a leader have that overall picture. But your team, who's working on only a part of it, might not have that, right? So show up to your team and tell them, hey, here is the vision of how we are doing it. I really don't know how we are exactly going to do it, but you're there to figure it out. But here is the vision that we are going to do. And when I know more, I will come and tell about it or talk about it more with you, and you can ask me questions. When I showed up as that leader to my teams, then they started respecting me and they started telling, hey, something is going on. I do not understand what this is, but I know that, and I trust that Priya will come back to me and she will tell me, because always she gives me the big picture and then she tells me what might happen and how should I get prepared for it. When you prepare your teams like that with trust and authenticity, then the teams themselves get more equipped and they're more fired up to do the things that every some other team might think, man, there is another change that is coming. I don't want to work on this.
It's true. And so I want to touch on two things that came up for me in that, is that this concept of curious questions and this concept of cool things. Because I also think sometimes when we use that kind of language, let's start with the curious questions, is that people think there's like one set of curious questions. And like, I've even had team members of mine ask me for the list of questions that I ask people. And I was like, that's not a thing. Like, I don't have a documented list. I be curious and I ask the question that I think of in the moment. And I think a lot of times when we don't have practice or we don't have the support of just like being curious, and honestly, in a lot of different scenarios and structures where people get educated, our curiosity is very controlled, right? So like I take this course and I'm allowed to ask questions about negotiation. And so then I get kind of programmed into a certain path of curiosity. And most of us forget that we have a natural curiosity. And there are things that we're naturally curious about that other people are not naturally curious about. And so when we talk about curious questions, this is really a like personal experience. Like, this is what you are listening to. This is what you're hearing. And what do you wonder? What would you ask? Okay? There's not a right question or a wrong question. I would actually argue that most of the most insightful questions were the most unpredictable questions for people in the room, and being like, wow, no one has ever asked me that before. And I've actually had that because I ask people things about their profile stuff, right? Like, oh, I read this phrase on your profile. What does that mean to you? And people are like, oh, no one's ever asked me that before. And I'm like, you put it on your profile. I would assume that you would know. But anyway, different thing. But again, the curious questions is not that go ask ChatGPT what is a question to ask in this scenario. It's you tapping into yourself to be like, what would I ask? What am I curious about? And there might be some conversations where you're sitting there and you're like, I don't have any questions. And that's also fine. So like, don't pretend you have questions if you don't have questions. And if you do have questions, share your questions. And I want to like extrapolate that same concept to the concept of cool things, right? So again, I think most of us are very judgy of our own experience, and we're like, well, that's not cool, right? And like, well, I'm not going to put that on there because I don't have a patent, right? So like, it's not cool enough. Once I get a patent, then I'll have a cool thing that I can put on my profile. But like, what in your experience was cool? Like, one of the things I talk about so often, and like when people ask me what I'm proudest about, right? Like, first, I'm a mom, so I say my son. But the second thing that I'm proudest about is that when I was 13, I went to NASA Space Camp and I won the Right Stuff Award, which is an award they give actual astronauts. And it's like one of the highlights of my life. And I'm super proud of it. And that, to someone else, one who doesn't care about space, is probably like, well, what is that? I've never even heard of that before. But like, to me, that's a cool thing. So I'm pretty sure it's on my profile, actually, somewhere, right? Like, because that's cool to me. So what is cool to you? I worked at a company where like mostly I had nothing to do. So I created this passport to fitness program that we did at lunchtime. And it is actually the thing. Like, if you look at my experience, you go all the way back in Tracy's experience on LinkedIn, I actually talk about it. Like, this was my job, but this was the most interesting thing I did at that job, right? Like, these are the stories that are, first of all, if we don't give people access to them, there's no way for them to find them, right? There's no way for you to know that Tracy won the Right Stuff Award. Like, that's a long time ago. It's not documented anywhere, except it was in our local newspaper, which I was very proud of. But like, this is only available for people to know if I share it. And so like, if you go back and you're like, oh man, yeah, I'm so proud of that. Like, that was something that was really cool to me. Use that, dude. You do not have to have a patent for something cool to have happened to you.
Yeah. I'll take a simple example. My daughter, who is 3 years old, comes to me, and every day she asks questions on why. When I tell her, hey, this is how certain things work, her question is why? Why, mommy? Why does this happen this way? Why does that happen this way? And Of course, I'm irritated sometimes, and I'm like, you ask too many questions, just like any other toddler. But that kept me pondering about, hey, she asks all the difficult questions to me. And of course, I get irritated. But at the end of the day, I think about, oh, somebody asked me this question. Why does that happen that way? I myself start asking the questions. So, probably in the tech industry, a lot of your leaders are also the same way. They might not have had a chance to ask that question. So, when you ask that question, even though at that moment they might be uh, they do not have an answer, or they might be this is not the right forum to answer those questions, but when they go back they think about it. I do. Many leaders who are authentic do. They do think about it, then they come back with a follow-up, or they do something about it, which is again a win for you, just because you asked that question. So I would encourage everyone to be curious. And Tracy, you talked about, hey, um, if you don't have a question, that's fine too, right? You can always be, you can say, hey, I don't have a question today. I will be okay about it. But I have a brand in my company, in my department, where I always ask a question for a friend. So we hear about a lot of things in the hallways, and there are people who genuinely want to ask a question but might not have the courage to ask it. So I ask that question on behalf of them, and I always in all my town halls ask a question for a friend,
Mhm.
which is probably the toughest question out there that leaders might like to hear. But hey, when it comes from a friend, they understand that, okay, even if it's a tough question, I need to answer it. So creating a brand for yourself is also making sure that others' voices are heard. As a technology leader, oftentimes we just think very narrow about, hey, what am I doing? What is my work today? How can I make sure that is all, nothing is broken from my side, like you said. But making sure that others' voices are also heard via you is also a brand that you can create for yourself. Which I created for me. Sure, you can create for yourself also, which again creates that authenticity and puts you a little above the rest of the folks out there as you grow in your technology career.
Yeah.
And Tracy, you asked about list of cool things, and hey, what have you done? Here is one thing that I have seen working in the technology industry for so long. People do cool things each and every day. Even if it's a small thing like identifying. Recently we had like a hackathon, which is where a bunch of people sit together and code for days together to bring out a product at the end. That's a hackathon. So at the end of the hackathon, we had in our company, T-Mobile hosted this hackathon, and we had about 80 teams participate, and the winner was getting $100,000, which is amazing, right? So everybody were working hard day and night, including me in my team, for 2 to 3 days together, 2.5 days ish. At the end, we were able to look at a code that was 30/40 years older and make a reasonably latest version of that code so we can understand what is happening, because things change. It's like language that was written in a different language. Now we're translating it and putting it into a different language. How tough it is to translate a book. It is as tough as that, but people did that. So when that's a cool thing, right? You try to do something over a course of time, like you have built something over 40 years, but you take that and make it into something cool in 4 days. So that is something where really, really cool that happened recently that I wanted to highlight. But people do cool things like that every day. The problem is people don't document those cool things. At the end of the day, when asked about, hey, what did you do in your work? People only talk about technology. They don't talk about things that they did. And I make sure that I keep a cool document, like you said. And I always write down, it's a simple notepad. I take it and I write, okay, this is what I did today. This is what I did today. Maybe you don't do cool things every day. I don't do cool things every day. So maybe once in a week or once in a month, I'm like, aha, this is such a nice thing that I have to note down. So I note it down, and I make sure to put that all there every quarter or every year, half year, whatever you're comfortable with, and send it out to people. Just send it out to people and say, hey, I am bragging about me. And that is something I feel technologists don't do a lot, but you can brag about you and send it to your manager, to your leaders, and tell them, hey, here are all the amazing, cool things that I did this year. just for your information, do not expect an answer from them. Do not expect them to come back to you and say, that is so cool, awesome.
Right.
Probably that is what everybody else does in your team also, but you did something that is worthwhile of your time over there, and people need to know about it. So be very um, comfortable in advertising yourself in the tech world, keeping this cool document. And when time comes, whichever you think is a good period of time, take that and put all of that together and send it out to people, put it in LinkedIn, brag about yourself.
Yeah. Well, I love that too, because I think a lot of times non-marketers are like, what do I do with social media? Right? And there's
Mhm.
like a lot of different people who will tell you a lot of different things that you can do with social media that will fall into the stupid marketing category because you're not sure why you're doing them. But this is actually this is two places where I think social media is a great opportunity. It was a great platform to use as an opportunity for this. If you have cool stuff, do a post, right? You participated in a hackathon over a weekend, talk about the hackathon. And I loved your example, Priya, because you didn't say, talk about this because I won the $100,000 prize. Talk about this because I did this thing in this
Mhm.
like we accomplished this thing and it's a cool thing. That's a great thing for a post. Curious questions are also great things for posts. So especially if, and again, like different businesses have different social media requirements that they have for their people, but generally a curious question can get around that, right? So if you're like, oh, we actually were like, we did this hackathon and this question came up and like we didn't really know what we thought about it. What do you think about it, LinkedIn? Right? Like these are one, what you're doing is you're demonstrating your curious questions to not just your immediate coworkers or to your business, but you're demonstrating that curiosity to a broader audience, even if your broader audience is like 150 people based on your community size on LinkedIn, right? But it also creates an opportunity for you to kind of, I think very often people have these boundaries where they're like, well, this is where I can share cool stuff. And this is where I can share curious questions. And what if we broke down the boundaries of that? And we were like, well, what if I could share curious questions on LinkedIn? Permission granted, by the way. You can do polls, you can just ask questions and you get open answers, right? Like there's lots of cool opportunities to do that. And what if I could post cool things on LinkedIn? And I wasn't expecting to get a job offer. I wasn't expecting to like get promoted or have a bunch of likes and shares and whatever on my post. But the point is that like I'm out there demonstrating that I do cool things. And so if 5 people see that I did a cool thing, that's 5 more people than who knew I did a cool thing, right? So also from this, the concept of marketing ourselves can often get convoluted by the vanity metrics of how many views and how many likes you have. But at the end of the day, first of all, if you're just going for like career development, right? Like, do you need 1 million people to have liked your post? Nope, you don't. It's really actually more interesting to be like, oh, these 5 people keep like liking or asking me, like these 3 people always ask me questions when I ask a question. These 5 people always like when I share cool things. Well, now this is like 8 people I could get into a conversation with it, which is actually a manageable amount of people instead of like hundreds of people. Right? Like I got a job to do. I don't have time to talk to hundreds of people. But again, we think about marketing, we think about Super Bowl ads, and we think about all of these things that are just like, this is not what we're talking about when we're talking about marketing yourself, right? This is about finding ways for you to show up in front of people in a way where you get to demonstrate yourself. And there's ways to do that in person. There's ways to do it at the water cooler. There's ways to do it virtually. There's ways to do it in a meeting. There's ways to do it on social media. There's lots of different channels and lots of different ways to do it. But it really just comes back to showing people who you are.
Yeah.
And if you can find the way where you feel comfortable showing people who you are, and that doesn't have to be all people on the entire internet, right? Then that is like the very first step of getting comfortable with this overall concept of marketing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Tracy. You hit the nail on the head by saying that, hey, you don't have to look for views and likes. If you're searching just that, then you're just thinking about, hey, how do I get 1 million views on my post right now, rather than trying to tell, hey, here's the cool thing that I did. And what I have noticed on my friends' LinkedIn profiles and when I view Instagram posts of people who talk about career development, specifically tech leaders who talk about technology, is that they talk authentically about what exactly they are building and how it is going to help you or me or even the viewers who are seeing this as a customer, right? That they connect the dots and they say, hey, here is something that we are building cool, and this is how it is going to help you. And that connects very easily with people. And obviously, that post gets millions of views because, hey, I'm understanding something like everybody are talking about AI. But if somebody comes and says, this is exactly what AI is with a beautiful picture and those spinning GIFs, then I understand that, okay, this is AI. Wow, this is so easy. And then that is kind of the post that you will see also more and more in your page, because that's explaining things very clearly in a very simple way. So once you start doing that about you, about the things that you do in your technology side, even about the ideas that you have, sometimes people think that, hey, in technology world, people think I have to draw like this beautiful diagram with all these platforms mentioned in there, how they connect with each other, what is the feedback system, all of those in there. Only then I can even go and showcase it to people. No, you can just put 4 boxes and go and talk about that idea in a very simple manner to people, which is what I often get appreciated about, because I don't do these big diagrams. I just take a small, okay, let me explain it to you by drawing it on the whiteboard, right? It's a simple start where a lot of people can do it. And if you're not very good at LinkedIn, I know that a bunch of companies have internal LinkedIn-like sites, and a lot of companies have community forums where you can go and talk about things that you think are cool, and your fellow nerds will appreciate it, because that happened to me when I thought something was cool and I posted in LinkedIn and I was expecting that, oh, come on, I'm going to get 5 million views for this. Just 5 people liked it. And I was like, damn, why did this happen? But when I went and talked about it in my internal company community forum, I got like 5,000 people liking it and my CTO commenting on it. I was like, what is going on here? Okay, these are the group of people who understand me. So then I realized that, okay, when people don't understand you in a certain platform, that doesn't mean it's your failure. You're marketing yourself well. It's just where you're marketing it. So then I started sharing cool ideas both in LinkedIn and in my internal community forums. And so people appreciated both of those.
Yeah, well, and this is another great point because I mentioned like connection and networking early or as well. And this is something that often comes up in marketing yourself because we go to networking events, we're going to job interviews, right? Like these are places where we are showing up in person to have conversations and build potential relationships with people. And this way to do that from a this is what someone told me I should say networking events. And there's a way to do that in like your natural way. But not everyone wants to have the same conversation that you want to have. And that's fine, right? There's 8 billion people on this planet. I can't have conversations with 8 billion people. That's ridiculous to believe. I can show up and I can have my conversations, and there's people in certain places who are going to be attracted to that. And so one, I think like I love this example of like LinkedIn and getting 5. Well, okay, maybe the world out there has convinced you that 5 likes is bad, but like, is 5 likes bad? That's still 5 more people who got access to that idea because you shared it. I always say, like, if one person takes away something from what I shared today, then it was worth me sharing it because now I've helped a person. And so you can play with those types of things, right? Like, what does it feel like for you to share that on LinkedIn versus how does it feel to share in your internal forum, or how does it feel to share just like verbally with someone at your water cooler? What if you could take that experience of the water cooler and make that on LinkedIn? these types of things are possible. I'm not saying that like this is the thing that all people should do, but this is where it's fun to get curious again about yourself. Like, how do I do that? Where do I create the most resonance with people? And how can I harness that and do that with more people? And again, at the end of the day, all of us are doing that for our own reasons. If you came to this show and you're like, oh, marketing yourself for tech leaders, I don't know if you're trying to go for a promotion. I don't know if you're trying to move companies. I don't know if you're trying to start your own business. I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. We all have that thing we're trying to accomplish. So when we take that unique destination that we're trying to get to and we mash it up with who we are as a person and our unique skill set and asking questions or in certain different areas, and we find our way to show those people, I don't need all people to know that. I need those people to know that, right? The people that can help me get to the destination I'm trying to get to. I don't need everybody to know that. And I find those people, and it's not as easy, folks, as just being like, it's women in their 40s that have marketing experience. It's just not as simple as that. The internet and algorithms have tried to convince us that demographic profiling is the answer, but usually this answer is coming through conversation. I come and I talk about something I care about. You're like, oh, I also care about that. And then all of a sudden we have a thing that we can go and build a conversation and a relationship and trust. And most of these things that we want take trust, right? If I'm going to get promoted, probably not going to get promoted if nobody trusts me to do that job, right? So all of these things are like a building, they're building blocks. They build on top of each other. And figuring out if you're building a skyscraper or you're building a car is a very important part of the puzzle before you put too much effort into like the actual building of the thing.
Yeah, absolutely, Tracy. You talked about one thing which is very, very important, networking. When you try to market yourself, you also have to have a group of people who then go and market about you to others. Right? You can't be the person talking to 70,000 employees in your company. Hey, but somebody else who knows 500 other people can do that for you. And how to do that is as simple as the water cooler talks that you talked about. An example is um, at T-Mobile, 8 years ago, we had 6 different types of e-commerce websites that were there um, internally and across the company to the public as well. Now, it started as a water cooler thought where a bunch of people came together and they said, what if we had just one e-commerce platform? And that's how my platform, digital commerce, that I now manage for and do all the cool stuff for, was born. So simple things like that, just a water cooler talk and a bunch of people getting together and talking about it, then going and selling that idea to multiple people that, hey, here is why it is very important to us. So you don't have to maintain 7 different systems. You just have to maintain one system. Wow, that is complex. Yes, it is complex, but let's do it the right way. Then they talked about how we can build the baseline, the infrastructure first very, very well on the software side, and then start with implementing the actual functionality that will give benefit to the customers. So simple thoughts like that, where you go and talk about it in a water cooler, you network with people, you just share an idea and that sparks curiosity, specifically in the technology world. And if you're a technology leader who's trying to grow, networks are the best way to grow, and always take an ally. Like my manager taught me that my leader told me, always take an ally to your meeting. And if you feel like, hey, I'm going to sell this to a bunch of different leaders in technology specifically, and they're probably going to say no because they don't want their teams to get disturbed on the software that they are building, but you take an ally and you explain to them really why this is important for them, and then that idea then starts becoming more and more irresistible to people. And then they say, okay, let's go and build this together. Because in software world, often people work in silos and we build same things again and again. But that can all be avoided if you just network and talk with each other. Then automatically you're seen as a technology leader who wants to grow and who is really invested in making sure that you're not spending a lot, you're making sure your systems are safe, you're making sure your systems can be dependable, which is what you want as a technology leader as you go high up. And that really happens when you talk with other people, you network with people, you understand what they're doing, you give them your thought process. Like me and my manager, every week, we have a one-on-one meeting where we do not discuss anything about, hey, this is what I did this week, or here are the things that I did. We just talk about this cool thing is happening here. What do we do about it? Do we react? Do we do something else? Or do we forget about it? What do we do? And that sparks a lot of curiosity among both of us. And then we start discussing ideas, and we are not discussing the work that is already completed or what is to come, which is like the mundane things anymore. So that is also another thing that sparks curiosity. Even networking one-on-one, you just forget about the work that you're doing, but then you talk about something that is interesting to you, then it takes the conversation to a different level.
Yeah. Well, and this is like, I remember the stat is probably old now, but like, because it's probably 2 years old, but the average number of connections that people had on LinkedIn at that time was like 901. So if I know, I go and I connect with another person, technically now I have access to 901 more people than I did before because I connected with that person. Now that doesn't mean all those 901 people are going to see a post that you post or any of those things. But when we show up and we create that, I call it a personal brand experience, right? I show up and I create that experience with someone by sharing ideas, then that experience does it stay with all people? No, but it stays with specific people. Those people carry it with them. We've now created an opportunity for those people to share that experience with us, with their network of people. And then you hit another 901, and then you hit another 901. And then pretty soon we're actually looking at like pretty significant numbers of people. And even I love this concept of like when you were talking about you and your manager having these conversations, I was like, the word that came to me was brainstorm. And so often when we're having conversations, we've already decided the destination of the conversation. Right? Whether you're in marketing or whether you're in tech, we're going to figure out how to make this feature work. Okay, well, I have a very small path of innovation that is available for that, right? But if I go into a room or I go to the water cooler and I'm like, this is actually the power of water coolers, I think, is because people don't create framework for the conversation there. They just like say whatever is relevant at the time. And that's what allows the like serendipity to happen. Like, I don't have a destination for this conversation. I just have ideas. It's just a brainstorm. Then there's like infinite places where it can go instead of just one destination it can go. And so when we look at that in our marketing, like, do we have places where those conversations are available? And if we don't, how might we? I mean, I believe all of us can do that. We just have to take it upon ourselves. But like, how could I create my own water cooler space? How could I turn my LinkedIn profile into a water cooler space? How could I actually like create that serendipity that happens at a water cooler in my town hall meetings? Maybe I don't want them in town hall meetings, but again, like this is where you just like, you get that freedom to explore what could be possible here with the equal opportunity to say like, we're not going to do anything about this. Right? Like, this is relevant. That doesn't feel like something for us. We're going to leave that and not deal with that because this feels like a lot more exciting than that. Like, so much of this, and we forget that so much of it is based on who we are and our natural areas of interest and our manager's area of interest. And when we allow those things to influence the conversation, influence the brainstorm, then that is also a practice in marketing yourself. So just because I realize we are running up on the hour and we could probably keep going with this, there's been like so many great ideas for marketing yourself coming out of this conversation. But I think the thing that is resonating most with me is how can we peel away any of those layers where we feel like marketing is like imposing something on us and try instead just to like go and be ourselves, to bring our personal brand to the room and let it do its thing, instead of having those frameworks that feel restricting imposed upon us. And before I go, Priya, I'm going to ask you for last thoughts, but I just want to share this quick message from Ari. Tech people, you will get only great outcomes if you decide to develop your personal brand. Your personal brand will open doors of opportunity for you while you sleep. And this is the thing. I mean, that might sound terrifying to some people too, right? Like, oh, I don't really want that. And that's also fine. That's you owning your personal brand, by the way, because you know what you're trying to accomplish and you feel like that accomplishes that. So if you did that just because someone told you that you should, then it falls into stupid marketing category. But this is, again, there's no right way. This isn't about like, oh, hey, this is Priya's personal brand and every tech leader should look like Priya. Nope. That's not the point. The point is, here's the process. Here's some of the activities that you can go through to find what that is for you. But this isn't about you being someone else or you doing a thing because Tracy and Priya already told you should, right? But because you're like, yeah, this makes sense for me. This feels like something I would do. And now I can go ahead and build on that foundation instead of building on a foundation of sand. So Priya, if people are interested in learning more about you or your journey and staying in the conversation, where is the best place for them to find you?
Yeah. Hey, first of all, thank you, Tracy, once again for allowing me to share my marketing techniques that I use. All I tell to everyone listening here is be curious, show up authentically as yourself, and ask those why questions without being afraid, even if it is in a room full of your senior leaders and you're afraid to. But ask it. Once you start asking that, the power of the why will change the way you grow in your career. And it will probably become your personal brand as well in future, just like how I have a brand for asking questions for my friends. And if you want to connect more with me, I will post my LinkedIn here, and you're welcome to connect with me via there. I share a lot of insightful thoughts there. Would love to connect with each and every one of you.
Oh, awesome. And Priya happens to be tagged in the LinkedIn post associated with this live. So if you're watching us there, you can just click on her name and it'll take you right to her profile. Let her know that you saw her here first so she has some info, and then there'll be lots of connecting opportunities. But I think, I love how you summarize that, Priya, because anyone who watches this show will immediately understand why I invited Priya to be on the show to talk about the leadership in tech, because these are not, yes, the things that you mentioned, right? The being curious and being authentic and asking why, these are things that will lead you in the direction of marketing yourself as a tech leader, but it also leads you in the direction of owning your personal brand, no matter what we're talking about. So if you're not a tech leader, also relevant. If you are a marketer, also relevant, right? If you are an internal resource versus an external fractional resource, equally relevant, right? Where would you be curious? I mean, there's lots of complexities with authenticity. Watch a whole bunch of the other shows we've done on authenticity to talk about that. But like, if you can get to that core of what that looks like for you and what that looks like for your team, then that immediately makes you stand out in the crowd. And in a world where it's super easy to get advice on how to do what other people have done, which doesn't make you stand out in the crowd, by the way, that is you copying someone else and only will ever make you second best. This community of people that watch this show, the Authentic Marketing Fellows who are guests on the show, these are the types of people who are not into that. We're not into cookie cutters and copying someone else, but going through the process of figuring out what you would do so that you can actually build your career, you can actually build your business, you can actually build your team. Those things are yours because you built them on you. And so if you are interested in doing any of that, connect with Priya, connect with me, connect with the other people who are in the chat today, and continue the conversation. If this is something that is real for you right now, please do not let it be the last conversation that you participate in, but the first of many conversations that you participate in to get you to the answer that is right for you. With that, Priya, thank you so much for sharing your insight and knowledge and wisdom with us today. I appreciate it so, so much. Ari, thank you for checking us out in the comments. Everybody else who was here too, who didn't comment, if you have comments coming out of this or you're watching this on replay, please feel free to still pop your comments in there, especially if you have questions. Tag me, tag Priya. We can come back and answer your questions as well. This is a show that lives forever, so you can always come back to it. Thank you so much for everybody for joining us today. And until next time, permission to do you. Bye, everyone.